In a modest suburban neighborhood where dreams often take a back seat to daily struggles, Mark Stevens works two jobs just to keep his own head above water. When new neighbors move in next door, a quiet woman and her two children, Sarah and Tommy, he notices how the kids longingly watch the sturdy oak tree in their backyard. Their mother seems to work long hours, her expensive car always gone before dawn. Despite his own exhaustion, Mark spends every precious free moment building them a treehouse, using scavenged wood and salvaged materials, crafting their dream hideaway one nail at a time. But what Mark doesn't know is that their seemingly modest neighbor, Isabella Montgomery, is actually a tech billionaire seeking a simpler life for her family. Could this humble carpenter's selfless gesture lead to something far more extraordinary than he ever imagined? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The first rays of sunlight hadn't yet touched the horizon when Mark Stevens pulled his weathered pickup truck into the driveway. His muscles ached from yesterday's construction job, but a quick glance at the majestic oak tree next door brought a smile to his tired face. He reached for his old toolbox, a faithful companion passed down from his father, its leather handle smooth from decades of use. Morning dew still clung to the grass as he walked around his house, coffee thermos in hand. The neighborhood was quiet, save for the gentle purr of an engine as his new neighbor's silver Mercedes glided past. Isabella Montgomery gave him a small wave, her children still drowsy in the back seat. Mark noticed how Sarah, the older one at 10, pressed her face against the window to look at the oak tree, while 7-year-old Tommy clutched a worn superhero action figure. Later that afternoon, between jobs, Mark found himself studying the oak tree's sturdy branches. Its thick limbs reached toward the sky like outstretched arms, nature's perfect foundation for a child's dream hideaway. He was measuring the trunk's circumference with his calloused hands when a small voice startled him. "Are you going to cut it down?" Sarah stood at the property line, her brother half hidden behind her, both wearing matching expressions of concern. Mark chuckled, shaking his head. "No, actually, I was thinking this might be the perfect spot for a treehouse, if your mom wouldn't." "Mind, that is." The children's eyes widened with wonder. Tommy stepped forward, his superhero forgotten in the grass. "A real treehouse, like in the movies?" "Well, maybe not quite that fancy," Mark admitted, thinking of his limited resources, "but something special just the same." Sarah's face fell slightly. "Mom's always busy. She probably won't have time to build one." "That's why I'm offering," Mark said, pulling his father's old notebook from his back pocket. The leather-bound journal was filled with sketches and measurements from decades of carpentry projects. "I've built a few tree houses in my day. What do you say we design one together?" For the next hour, Mark sat with the children on his porch steps, sketching ideas. Sarah wanted a reading nook with a window seat, while Tommy insisted on a trapdoor for secret missions. Their enthusiasm was contagious, and Mark found himself adding details he knew would stretch his budget, but the joy in their faces made it impossible to say no. As the sun began to set, they heard the distinct sound of the Mercedes returning. The children gathered their things quickly, Sarah carefully folding their sketch and tucking it into her pocket. "Thank you, Mr. Stevens," she said formally, suddenly shy again. "Mark," he corrected gently. "Mr. Stevens was my father." He watched them run home, their excited chatter carrying across the lawn. Through the gathering dusk, he saw Isabella emerge from her car, looking elegantly put together despite the late hour. She greeted her children with warm hugs, her attention fully focused on their animated conversation. Later that night, as Mark sorted through his tools and took inventory of materials he might be able to salvage from his job sites, he wondered about their story. Single parents recognized each other, even without words. There was a certain look they shared, a weight carried in the shoulders. But Isabella carried herself differently, with a grace that spoke of resources beyond his understanding. Still, She had chosen this modest neighborhood, this simple life for her children. Mark ran his hand along his father's toolbox, remembering the lessons taught alongside each tool. "The greatest gift we can give," his father used to say, "costs nothing but time and care." Tomorrow would be another early morning, another long day of work, but as he sketched out preliminary plans in his father's notebook, Mark felt a spark of excitement he hadn't experienced in years. Outside his window, the old oak tree stood sentinel. In the growing darkness, its branches swaying gently in the evening breeze, as if nodding in approval of the dreams about to take shape among its leaves. Over the next few days, Mark's front porch became an impromptu design studio. Sarah and Tommy would appear after school, their backpacks heavy with homework, but their minds full of treehouse dreams. They spread their drawings across the weathered wooden planks, Sarah's careful architectural renderings in colored pencil, Tommy's enthusiastic crayon masterpieces featuring zip lines and secret tunnels. Mark found himself looking forward to these afternoon sessions. He'd prepare snacks, nothing fancy, just apple slices and peanut butter crackers, and listen to their stories while translating their ideas into practical blueprints. Sarah had inherited her mother's attention to detail, often pointing out practical considerations that surprised him. "The window seat needs to face east," she explained seriously, "so we can watch the sunrise while reading." Tommy nodded vigorously, adding, "And we need a special shelf for Mum's teacup when she visits." The mention of their mother made Mark glance toward the Montgomery house. Isabella's car was, as usual, absent, but evidence of her devotion was everywhere, from the children's well-kept appearances to the way they spoke about her with unwavering affection. On Saturday morning, Mark began gathering materials. His contractor friends, knowing his project, started setting aside salvageable wood from their demolition sites. Old Mrs. Henderson down the street contributed weathered boards from her dismantled garden shed, the wood still solid beneath its faded paint. Even Mr. Patterson, known for his grumpy disposition, appeared with a box of unused hardware from his garage. "Heard you're building something special," he muttered, avoiding eye contact. "These have been collecting dust since '82. Word spread through the neighborhood like a gentle breeze. People would slow their cars, passing the oak tree, imagining the structure that would soon take shape among its branches. Some stopped to share stories of their own childhood tree houses, their eyes growing distant with nostalgia. The children's excitement was infectious. They created a building supply headquarters in Mark's garage, carefully organizing donations and categorizing materials. Sarah developed a meticulous inventory system, while Tommy appointed himself chief safety inspector, proudly wearing a plastic hard hat Mark had given him. One evening, as Mark was sorting through the day's contributions, he noticed Sarah sitting quietly on the porch steps, holding their original sketch. Her usual confidence seemed dimmed. "Everything okay, architect?" he asked, settling beside her. She looked up, her eyes serious. "What if Mom thinks it's too much trouble? She works so hard, and sometimes she looks so tired." Mark considered his words carefully. "You know, Sarah, sometimes the best gift we can give someone is a place to rest. Maybe this treehouse can be that special place for all of you. Did you have a treehouse when you were little?" Tommy appeared from around the corner, clutching his ever-present superhero figure. Mark smiled, memories flooding back. "Not exactly, but my dad and we built things together all the time. That's where I learned that the best projects aren't about the fanciest materials or the biggest budget. They're about the love you build into them." As if on cue, Isabella's Mercedes turned into their driveway. The children gathered their things, but not before Sarah carefully placed their latest design refinements in the special folder they decorated. Mark watched as they ran to greet their mother, their voices overlapping as they shared the day's progress. Isabella caught his eye over the children's heads and gave him a warm smile, one that seemed to hold 1,000 unspoken words. For a moment, Mark thought he saw something flicker across her face, a shadow of some deeper emotion, but then Tommy tugged at her hand, eager to show her their organizing system, and the moment passed. That night, reviewing their plans by lamplight, Mark realized the project had grown beyond his initial vision. Every added detail, the reading nook, the secret compartments, the special tea shelf, represented a piece of their evolving story. He might not have the resources to match the grandeur of the tree houses in Tommy's beloved movies, but he could build something authentic, something that spoke of care and craftsmanship and community. Outside, the oak tree's leaves rustled in, the evening breeze, its branches reaching toward a sky filled with possibilities. Tomorrow, they would begin turning dreams into reality, one carefully placed board at a time. While the neighborhood slept, Isabella Montgomery sat in her home office, surrounded by screens displaying real-time data from her tech empire. The soft blue glow illuminated her features as she led a video conference with executives across 3 continents. Gone was the carefully cultivated image of the modest single mother. Here, she was the formidable CEO of Montgomery Digital Solutions, architect of some of the decade's most revolutionary software innovations. The Singapore merger needs to close by Friday, she directed, her voice carrying the quiet authority that had become legendary in Silicon Valley. A notification flashed on her screen. Another article about the mysterious Montgomery and her unconventional decision to step back from public life. She dismissed it with a practiced gesture. Dawn was approaching when she finally powered down her systems. The house was quiet except for the gentle hum of the central air. She paused at Tommy's room, smiling at the superhero posters covering his walls. In Sarah's room, a stack of Treehouse drawings lay scattered across the desk, each one more detailed than the last. Isabella picked up one of the sketches, her fingers tracing the careful measurements in her daughter's handwriting. She recognized the precision in these drawings, the same drive for perfection that had fueled her own rise to success. But here, it was channeled into something pure, untainted by market pressures and shareholder expectations. Through the window, she could see Mark's truck already parked in his driveway. He moved quietly, setting up his workstation with the efficiency of someone who knew the value of early morning hours. She watched him reference the children's drawings with the same respect he'd give professional blueprints. The divide between her worlds had never felt so stark. In one, she commanded billions in resources, her decisions shaping the future of technology. In the other, she watched a carpenter with calloused hands build her children's dreams from salvaged wood and second-hand materials. Her phone buzzed. Her chief financial officer with urgent updates about market fluctuations in Asian markets. Isabella sighed, slipping back into her role as tech pioneer. But her eyes kept drifting to the oak tree, where Mark was now carefully measuring branches, his father's notebook in hand. Later that morning, as she drove the children to school, Tommy's excited voice filled the car. "Mr. Mark says we can help paint when it's ready. Can we get blue paint, Mom, and yellow, and maybe some red for the secret door?" Sarah, ever practical, added, "He's using special weather-resistant wood for the floor. Did you know his dad taught him everything about building? He has all these old tools that tell stories." Isabella felt a pang of recognition. Her own father had been absent during her rise to success, his attention focused on the family's business empire. She'd promised herself her children would have a different experience, hence this experiment in normal living. But watching them light up about the Treehouse project, she wondered if she'd accidentally created a different kind of distance. At a red light, she caught sight of her reflection in the rearview mirror. The elegant CEO was carefully hidden beneath the facade of a working single mother, her designer clothes exchanged for simple business wear, her signature accessories locked away. The deception weighed on her, but the joy in her children's voices as they discussed their afternoon plans with Mark convinced her it was worth it. "Mom?" Sarah's voice pulled her from her thoughts. "Will you be home early enough to see what we worked on today?" Isabella's heart tightened. In her other life, she had a board meeting scheduled until late evening. "I'll try my best, sweetheart. Save all the details for me?" The children nodded, used to her schedule but never completely, hiding their disappointment. As they pulled up to the school, Isabella made a decision. She would have her assistant clear tomorrow afternoon. Just a few hours to be present, to see this project through her children's eyes rather than through glimpses stolen between conference calls. After all, she thought, as she watched them walk, into school, what was the point of all her success if she couldn't give her children the one thing money couldn't buy? Genuine happiness blooming in ordinary moments. The weekend arrived with the kind of perfect autumn weather that seemed made for building tree houses. Mark had spent hours preparing, selecting the strongest salvaged boards for the foundation platform. Each piece was carefully inspected, its history written in grain patterns and old nail holes. He'd arrived before sunrise, wanting to make real progress before the children arrived. The neighborhood stirred to life around him as he worked. Mrs. Henderson brought him a thermos of coffee. "My Harold's special blend," she said, her eyes misting at the mention of her late husband. Other neighbors walked by with encouraging waves, some stopping to watch as the first crucial support beams took shape. Sarah and Tommy appeared just as Mark was securing the last support bracket, their faces glowing with anticipation. To his surprise, Isabella was with them, dressed casually in jeans and a simple sweater. She'd tied her hair back, looking more relaxed than he'd ever seen her. "The children insisted I see the beginning," she explained, a hint of apology in her voice. "I hope we're not interrupting." Mark shook his head, noticing how she studied the construction with an expert's eye. "Actually, I could use some help. These platforms need to be perfectly level." He held out his father's old spirit level, its brass edges worn smooth with age. What followed was a lesson in teamwork. Tommy became the official tool handler, proudly announcing each item needed. Sarah documented everything with careful notes and sketches, and Isabella, to Mark's surprise, demonstrated an innate understanding of structural principles. "The lateral support here," she suggested, pointing to a crucial joint, "would be stronger with a crossbeam." Her knowledge seemed to slip out naturally, then she'd catch herself, as if remembering to maintain some invisible boundary. As the morning progressed, other neighborhood children gathered around the tree. Mark organized them into teams, giving each child a specific responsibility. Even the usually shy Rodriguez twins from 2 doors down joined in, their father translating Mark's instructions into Spanish. The platform slowly took shape, a solid foundation suspended among the branches. Mark had chosen this height carefully, high enough to feel magical but low enough to be safe. Every few minutes Tommy would ask, "Is it really going to be our treehouse?" His voice held equal measures of hope and disbelief. "It's going to be everyone's treehouse," Mark answered, watching the growing circle of helpers. "That's what makes it special." Isabella stood slightly apart, observing the scene with an expression Mark couldn't quite read. When their eyes met, she smiled, but there was something beneath the surface, a weight of unspoken thoughts. During a water break, she approached him. "You have a gift," she said quietly. "Not just for building, but for bringing people together." Mark wiped his brow with his sleeve. "Sometimes people just need permission to be part of something bigger than themselves, even if it starts small." Her question seemed to carry deeper meaning. "Especially then," he gestured to the platform. "Look at this. Salvaged wood, donated, supplies, borrowed tools, but put them together with care and purpose, and you create something extraordinary," Isabella finished, her voice soft. For a moment, she seemed about to say more, but her phone buzzed. A shadow crossed her face as she checked the screen. "I have to go," she said, regret evident in her tone. "A work emergency." The children's disappointment was visible, but tempered by their excitement about the project. They hugged their mother goodbye, quickly returning to their assigned tasks. Mark watched Isabella walk to her car, noting how her shoulders straightened, her posture shifting into something more formal. The rest of the day passed in a blur of activity. By sunset, the main platform was complete, solid and true. Mark gathered everyone for a final inspection, letting each child check the spirit level and sign their name on a special board that would become part of the floor. After the others had gone home, Sarah lingered. She ran her hand along the smooth surface of the platform, then looked at Mark with serious eyes. "Mum's different when she's here," she said, "more like she used to be before." She stopped herself, suddenly cautious. Mark waited, but she just smiled and said goodbye, running home through the gathering dusk. That evening, as Mark put away his tools, he thought about Sarah's words, about Isabella's hidden knowledge of construction, about all the small mysteries that seemed to surround the Montgomery family. But looking at the platform, strong and sure among the branches, he realized that sometimes the most important foundations aren't the ones you can see. The walls began to rise, each weathered board telling its own story. Mark had chosen the materials carefully, some from an old barn in the county, others from renovation projects across town. The wood bore the marks of time, sun-bleached patinas, wandering grain patterns, and the occasional knot that Tommy insisted looked exactly like a pirate's face. "Every imperfection adds character," Mark explained, showing Sarah how to sand a rough edge. She ran her fingers along the smooth surface, nodding with understanding that seemed beyond her years. The neighborhood's involvement continued to grow. Mr. Patterson, surprisingly, became a regular fixture, sharing stories of his days as a master carpenter while helping to level wall sections. "You don't see joinery like this anymore," he'd say, demonstrating techniques that had been passed down through generations. One afternoon, as Mark was fitting a particularly challenging corner piece, he noticed Isabella watching from her home office window. She held what looked like an important document, but her attention was fixed on the construction. Their eyes met briefly before she stepped back, disappearing behind the curtain. The children had developed their own routine. Every day after school, they'd change clothes and report for Treehouse duty. Sarah maintained their project journal, documenting each day's progress with photographs taken on an old digital camera Mark had found in his closet. Tommy had appointed himself chief nail holder, proudly wearing the tool belt Mark had adjusted to fit his small frame. "Mom asked lots of questions about the treehouse last night," Sarah mentioned casually as she helped Mark measure a window frame. "She wanted to know all about the support systems and weather protection." Mark paused, recalling Isabella's surprisingly technical questions during their brief encounters. "Your mom seems to know quite a bit about construction." "She knows about lots of things," Tommy chimed in, "but she doesn't talk about them much anymore. Not since we moved here." Before Mark could process this comment, a delivery truck pulled up to the Montgomery house. The driver, looking somewhat confused, carried a small package to the door. Through the open window, Mark heard Isabella's voice, unusually sharp. "I specifically requested unmarked packaging." The walls continued to rise over the next few days, and with them, Mark's curiosity about his neighbors grew. He noticed small inconsistencies: Isabella's expert grasp of engineering principles, the late-night glow of multiple computer screens in her office, the way she smoothly deflected questions about her work. But there were other observations too: her genuine delight in her children's excitement, the gentle way she listened to their detailed reports about treehouse progress, how she'd sometimes pause in her busy schedule just to watch them work with Mark. One evening, as Mark was securing the last wall panel, a sudden gust of wind scattered their materials. As he and the children rushed to gather everything, Isabella appeared, helping to collect papers and tools. She moved with unexpected efficiency, her instincts quick and sure. "You've done this before," Mark said, not quite a question. Isabella hesitated, then smiled slightly. "Life teaches you to be prepared." She handed him a stack of rescued drawings. "These structures you're building, they're not just walls, are they?" Mark looked at the treehouse, at the children carefully organizing. the rescued supplies, at the neighbors who had come out to help. No, he agreed. There's something more. As if to emphasize his point, Tommy called out excitedly, "Look what we found." He held up a weathered board where someone had carved a heart decades ago. "Can we use it for the special wall?" The special wall had become their name for the section where they planned to display treasures and memories. Mark watched as Isabella traced the carved heart with her finger, her expression softening. "Sometimes," she said quietly, almost to herself, "the most valuable things are the ones that carry a history." She looked at Mark then, and for a moment he saw something in her eyes, a longing perhaps for something simpler than whatever complicated life she was hiding. But the moment passed, broken by the sound of her phone's insistent buzzing. She straightened, professional mask sliding back into place, and bid them good evening. As she walked away, Mark noticed how she paused at her front door, looking back at the rising treehouse walls with an expression that held both wonder and regret. The morning dawned cool and misty, the kind of autumn day that made hot coffee taste like heaven. Mark had just settled into his early routine when he spotted Isabella crossing the yard, 2 steaming travel mugs in hand. She wore casual clothes. Again, a simple sweater and jeans that somehow looked both expensive and understated. "I thought you might like to try my blend," she said, offering him a mug. "It's from a small farm in Costa Rica." The coffee was unlike anything Mark had ever tasted, rich with subtle flavors he couldn't name. "This isn't exactly grocery store coffee," he observed. "No," Isabella agreed, a small smile playing at her lips. "Let's just say I have connections." She settled onto one of the wooden sawhorses, looking surprisingly comfortable in the makeshift workspace. They sat in companionable silence, watching the sun burn away the morning mist. The treehouse had taken on a distinct personality now, its weathered walls rising among the oak's branches like they'd always belonged there. "Sarah showed me the plans for the reading nook last night," Isabella said finally. "She's already planning the book collection." "She has quite an eye for detail," Mark replied. "Yesterday she calculated the exact angle for the window seat to catch the morning light." "She gets that from—" Isabella stopped abruptly, taking a long sip of coffee. "She's always been observant." Mark noticed her slip, but didn't press. Instead, he pulled out his father's notebook, showing her the latest modifications. "I thought we could add some built-in storage here, maybe a secret compartment for Tommy's treasures." Isabella leaned in, her shoulder brushing his as she studied. The drawings. Her perfume was subtle but distinctive, probably worth more than his monthly mortgage payment. "These designs," she said, tracing a finger along one particularly complex joint, "they're remarkably sophisticated. My father believed that anything worth building was worth building right." Mark watched her hands move over the drawings with the confidence of someone who understood engineering. "Though I suspect you know a thing or two about that yourself." She withdrew slightly, her professional mask slipping back into place. But before she could respond, they heard Tommy's excited voice from the house. "Mom, you're still here!" The children bounded across the yard in their pajamas, Sarah carrying a folder bulging with new sketches. They settled naturally around the adults, Tommy climbing onto his mother's lap while Sarah spread her drawings on the makeshift table. For the next hour, they planned and dreamed together. Isabella's suggestions were subtle but insightful. Each, when revealing a depth of knowledge she seemed to catch herself sharing. The children, Mark noticed, didn't appear surprised by their mother's expertise. "Remember when you helped design my science fair project?" Sarah said eagerly. "The one with the solar-powered—" She stopped at a quick look from her mother. The moment was interrupted by Isabella's phone. She checked it with a frown, and Mark saw complex graphs and charts flash across the screen before she quickly tucked it away. "I have to go," she said, regret evident in her voice. "Conference call." "But, Mom," Tommy protested, "you promised to help us paint the secret door." Isabella hesitated, clearly torn. Mark watched her internal struggle play across her face. "The paint can wait," he offered. Maybe we could all have dinner tonight instead. I make a mean spaghetti, and we can review the final plans together." The words surprised him as much as everyone else. He hadn't entertained since his wife passed. The thought of filling his small house with family sounds both appealing and terrifying. Isabella's expression softened. "We'd like that, wouldn't we, kids?" The children's enthusiastic response sealed the deal. As Isabella headed inside to prepare for her call, Sarah lingered behind. "Mom seems happy here," she said thoughtfully. "Like before, when we lived—" She caught herself, much like her mother had earlier. Mark picked up a piece of sandpaper, giving Sarah a task to ease the moment. "Sometimes," he said carefully, "people need different kinds of homes at different times." Sarah nodded, understanding flowing between them. They worked together quietly, smoothing rough edges, each lost in their own thoughts. Above them, the treehouse seemed to glow in the morning light, its imperfect walls holding space for all their unspoken stories. Dark clouds gathered on the horizon as Mark secured tarps over the treehouse's exposed sections. The weather report had warned of an approaching storm, unusually severe for the season. He worked quickly, double-checking each covering, knowing how much damage rain could do to unprotected wood. "Need any help?" Isabella's voice startled him. She stood at the base of the tree, looking up with concern. Her elegant blazer seemed out of place against the threatening sky. "Shouldn't you be headed to work?" Mark asked, noting her formal attire. "The children were worried about the treehouse." She glanced at her watch, a subtle gesture that spoke of countless meetings and deadlines. "I thought I'd check before—" A sudden gust of wind interrupted her, sending loose papers swirling. As they scrambled to catch them, a glossy magazine page caught against Isabella's leg. Mark reached for it just as she did, and their hands met over the paper. The headline made them both freeze. "Tech Titan Isabella Montgomery's Mysterious Disappearance." Time seemed to stop. Isabella's face went pale as Mark stared at the photo on the page, a younger version of his neighbor in business attire, accepting some prestigious award. The woman in the picture radiated power and confidence, standing at a podium with the Montgomery Digital Solutions logo behind her. Thunder rumbled overhead as their eyes met. "I can explain," Isabella began, but her phone erupted with alerts. She glanced at the screen, her expression turning to alarm. "No, no, no!" More alerts followed. Through the rain that had begun to fall, Mark could see multiple screens lighting up in her home office. Isabella's carefully constructed worlds were colliding. "Mom," Sarah's voice carried from their back door. "Your assistant is on the emergency line. She says it's about the Singapore merger." Isabella stood frozen between her house and the treehouse, rain soaking through her expensive blazer. For the first time since Mark had known her, she looked utterly lost. "Go," he said quietly. "I'll secure everything here." She hesitated, conflict clear on her face. "Mark, I never meant to—" "We can talk later," he assured her, already turning back to his work. Some things can't wait. Through the increasing rain, he watched her hurry inside, transforming with each step back into the powerful CEO she'd been hiding all along. The children appeared briefly at the window, their faces worried before Isabella drew them away. Mark worked methodically through the storm, ensuring every vulnerable part of the treehouse was protected. The wind howled through the oak's branches, testing his preparations. Around him, neighbors hurried to secure their own properties. Garbage, cans rolled away, lawn furniture clattered across driveways. Mrs. Henderson appeared with her umbrella. "You should come inside, dear," she called over the wind. "That tree's not safe in this weather." But Mark stayed, adding extra supports where needed. This wasn't just about protecting wood and nails anymore. Every board he'd carefully selected, every joint he'd lovingly crafted, held pieces of Sarah and Tommy's dreams. He thought of their faces lighting up each time they discovered a new detail, their pride in contributing to something larger than themselves. The storm raged through the afternoon. From his position on the platform, Mark caught glimpses through the Montgomery's windows, Isabella pacing with a phone, gesturing intensely. the children watching their mother with worried expressions, multiple screens displaying graphs and charts and urgent messages. As evening approached, the wind finally began to ease. Mark made one final check of the tarps, his clothes soaked through. The treehouse had weathered the storm, its sturdy frame standing firm against nature's fury. But as he climbed down, he knew this wasn't the real storm they needed to worry about. In his pocket, the crumpled magazine page felt like a burning secret. Questions tumbled through his mind. Why would a tech billionaire choose to live here? What was she hiding from? And most importantly, what would this revelation mean for the children who had come to trust him with their dreams? Looking up at the treehouse, now just a dark shape against the clearing sky, Mark realized that sometimes the strongest structures could be shaken by unseen forces, and the truest foundations weren't made of wood at all. The morning after the storm dawned clear and crisp, but the calm weather belied the tension hanging in the air. Mark sat at his kitchen table, the magazine article spread before him alongside an old photograph of his own. In it, a younger version of himself stood proudly next to his father outside their small carpentry shop. Simple times, honest work. He'd spent half the night reading about Isabella Montgomery online. The stories painted a picture of a brilliant innovator who'd built her company from nothing, revolutionizing software development while maintaining a notoriously private, personal life. Last year, she'd mysteriously stepped back from public view, citing a desire to refocus on family priorities. The sound of car doors closing drew him to the window. Isabella was helping the children into her Mercedes, dressed again in her carefully crafted, ordinary mom attire. She paused, looking toward his house, but Mark stepped back from the window. Later that morning, as he worked on repairing minor storm damage to the treehouse, he heard familiar footsteps on the ladder. "Is it okay if I still help?" Sarah's voice was unusually tentative. "Mom said we should ask first now that—" Mark turned to find both children watching him anxiously from the platform entrance. Tommy clutched his superhero figure so tightly his knuckles were white. "Of course you can help," Mark said firmly. "Nothing's changed about that." But things had changed. As they worked, the children were quieter, more careful with their words. When Tommy started to tell a story about their old house, Sarah quickly shushed him. "You know," Mark said, setting down his hammer, "my dad used to say that secrets are like heavy tools. They're harder to carry alone." Sarah looked at her brother, then back at Mark. "We had to move here because people wouldn't leave Mom alone," she said finally. "They kept taking pictures of us at school and asking mean questions about Dad. The other kids said Mom was a robot queen," Tommy added. "But she's not. She just makes computers work better." Mark thought about Isabella's careful orchestration of their simple life here, the lengths she'd gone to protect her children's normalcy. "Your mom must love you very much to change her whole life like that." "She's still the same mom," Sarah said defensively. "She just pretends to be a different kind of mom here. For us." A throat cleared below them. Isabella stood at the base of the tree, still in her business clothes, but with an air of having made an important decision. "Children, could you give Mr. Stevens and me a moment?" Her formal tone made both kids scramble down quickly. Mark descended more slowly, trying to read her expression. Up close, he could see the toll the past day had taken. Subtle signs of stress around her eyes, a slight tension in her shoulders. She held out a familiar-looking thermos. "Peace offering?" They settled on his porch steps, the rich aroma of her Costa Rican coffee filling the space between them. "I don't do well with vulnerability," Isabella began, staring into her cup. "In my world, it's often mistaken for weakness." She pulled out her phone, showing him a photo of a much younger version of herself in a cramped apartment, surrounded by computer parts. "I built my first company in a space smaller than your tool." "Shed," Mark nodded, thinking of his father's small shop. "Success changes things." "It changed everything," she agreed, "except what matters most." She looked toward the treehouse where the children were pretending not to watch them. They deserve a chance at a normal childhood away from the spotlight. and expectations that come with my name. Is that possible now? Mark asked gently. After yesterday, Isabella's hand tightened around her cup. The Singapore merger is secure, but there are rumors starting. Someone recognized me at the children's school last week. It was only a matter of time. They sat in silence, watching the oak's leaves flutter in the breeze. The treehouse stood strong among the branches, somehow more real and precious for having weathered yesterday's storm. You know, Mark said finally, when you're building something to last, you don't just plan for sunny days. You build it strong, enough to handle storms too. Isabella turned to him, really looking at him for the first time since the revelation. And what exactly are we building here, Mark? The question hung between them, heavy with possibility. Before he could answer, Tommy's voice called down from the treehouse. Mom, we found where the leak is. Can we help fix it? Please? A smile tugged at Isabella's lips, not the polished one she wore for business, but something more genuine. Well, she said, standing and brushing off her expensive slacks, I do know a thing or two about repairs. The first sign of trouble came in the form of a glossy business magazine left conspicuously on Mark's porch. The cover featured a blurry photo of Isabella leaving the local grocery store with the headline, Found, Tech's Most Elusive Billionaire. The subtitle read, Montgomery Digital's CEO's Secret Life in Suburban America. Mark quickly tucked the magazine away before the children could see it, but he knew this was just the beginning. Already, unfamiliar cars were driving slowly past their houses, cameras clicking from behind tinted windows. The treehouse had become their sanctuary. That afternoon, as Mark worked on installing the reading nook's window seat, he could hear Isabella pacing below, her voice tight as she spoke with her legal team. I don't care what it costs, she was saying. I want every copy pulled from the shelves and find out who leaked my location. She paused, listening. No, I won't make a statement. That's exactly what I've been trying to avoid. Sarah and Tommy worked quietly beside Mark, their usual chatter subdued. They'd seen this before, recognized the signs of their carefully constructed piece crumbling. Mr. Mark, Tommy whispered, clutching his ever-present superhero figure, are we going to have to move again? Before Mark could answer, Mrs. Henderson's voice called up urgently. Mark, dear, you might want to see this. A small crowd had gathered at the end of the street. Television vans were setting up, reporters doing test shots with the treehouse in the background. One particularly bold photographer had stepped onto Mark's property, trying to get a better angle. This is private property, Mark called out firmly, descending the ladder. Please leave. Just a few questions, a reporter shouted. Is it true that Isabella Montgomery is funding a multi-million-dollar treehouse project? Is this a publicity stunt for her company's new family-focused software line? Isabella emerged from her house, her CEO persona fully in place. My children are here, she said, her voice carrying that quiet authority that had made her famous. In the tech world, if you have questions about Montgomery Digital Solutions, direct them to our press office. But the cameras kept clicking, questions overlapping. Ms. Montgomery, why the secret life? Is this related to your ex-husband's new position in Silicon Valley? Are the rumors about a hostile takeover true? Tommy's small voice cut through the chaos. Stop being mean to my mum. He stood on the treehouse platform, tears in his eyes, but chin raised defiantly. Sarah stood beside him, one arm protectively around her brother. The sight of the children seemed to give Isabella new resolve. Mark, she said quietly, I'm so sorry about this. I never meant to bring chaos to your doorstep. Mark watched as more cars arrived, as neighbors came out to see the commotion, as the peaceful community they'd built began to fracture under the weight of public curiosity. The treehouse stood above it all, a testament to simpler truths. No, he said. My father used to say that good fences make good neighbors. He turned to the gathered media. And right now, you're all trespassing. Mr. Patterson emerged from his house, garden hose in hand. Mrs. Henderson appeared with her infamous air horn from her days as a high school coach. Other neighbors stepped, forward, forming a protective circle around their own. "This is more than just a treehouse," Mark continued, his voice carrying across the yard. "This is about a community, about children, about the right to build something genuine without it becoming a spectacle." Isabella looked at him with surprise, and something deeper, a recognition of what they'd all created together. She reached for her phone one last time. "Janet," she said to her assistant, "implement Protocol Omega, yes, all of it, and call Charles at the network. Tell him if these vultures aren't gone in 10 minutes, Montgomery Digital pulls all advertising, forever." The threat worked. Within minutes, the media began to pack up, though everyone knew this was just a temporary reprieve. As the last van pulled away, Isabella's phone buzzed again, more urgent business matters demanding attention. She looked torn between her worlds again, but Mark was already climbing back up to the treehouse. "Come on," he called down. "That window seat won't install itself, and I think we could all use some time up here right now." The children's faces brightened. After a moment's hesitation, Isabella kicked off her expensive heels and reached for the ladder. Sometimes, Mark thought, watching her climb up in her designer suit, the bravest thing you can do is choose what's real over what's expected. The article that changed everything appeared online at midnight. Mark found it during his usual early morning coffee, the headline glaring from his phone screen. "The Billionaire's Carpenter, Inside Tech Titan's $1 million Simple Life Deception." The story painted Isabella as calculating and manipulative, suggesting she'd orchestrated their entire neighborhood dynamic as an elaborate PR stunt. It described Mark as an unwitting pawn in her game, quoted anonymous sources claiming she'd chosen their street specifically because of his reputation as a skilled craftsman, and even implied she'd paid neighbors to participate in the charade. Worst of all, it included private details about the Treehouse project, details only someone intimately involved could have known. The betrayal hit Mark like a physical blow when he reached the article's final paragraph and saw the photo credit. "Images courtesy of Sarah Montgomery's project journal." He was still staring at his phone when a car door slammed outside. Isabella stood in his driveway, wearing a rumpled business suit, her usual composure shattered. "I can explain," she began. But Mark cut her off. "Was any of it real?" His voice was quiet, but it carried across the pre-dawn stillness. "Or was I just a convenient story for your next board meeting?" "How can you even think that?" Isabella's composure cracked further. "After everything we've—" "Mom!" Sarah's voice interrupted them. She stood on her front porch in pajamas, clutching her project journal. "My camera's missing. And my notebook. Someone went through it." Isabella's face went pale. "What?" "I trusted you," Mark said, the pieces falling into place. "I let you into my life, shared my father's techniques, his stories." "No." Isabella stepped forward, realization dawning. "Mark, I would never—" "Mr. Mark," Tommy's voice carried from their house. "The treehouse is on TV." They all turned to see Tommy standing in front of their living room window, where a morning news show was featuring footage of the treehouse construction. Intimate moments Mark remembered clearly. Teaching Sarah to sandwood, helping Tommy place. His first nail, quiet conversations with Isabella, played across the screen like scenes from a reality show. "My assistant," Isabella whispered, horror creeping into her voice. "Janet, she must have, when she was here during the storm." But Mark wasn't listening. He was watching Sarah's face as she recognized her own photographs on national television. Her private documentation of their special project turned into entertainment for strangers. "I'm calling Janet right now." Isabella reached for her phone, CEO mode engaging. "I'll have this shut down immediately. I'll sue every network that—" "That's what you do, isn't it?" Mark interrupted. "Throw money and lawyers at problems until they go away. Is that why you chose this neighborhood? We were just another problem to solve?" "Dad used to say that too," Tommy said quietly. Before he left, Isabella flinched as if struck. For a moment she looked utterly lost. Not a powerful CEO, not a protective mother. Just a woman watching something precious slip through her fingers. The treehouse was supposed to be different, Sarah said, her voice small. It was supposed to be just ours. Mark looked up at the structure he'd poured his heart into. Every board, every nail, every careful joint had been a gesture of faith, in community, in simple pleasures, in the possibility of building something real in a world of smoke and mirrors. I think, he said carefully, we all need some time to process this. Mark, please. Isabella stepped forward, but he was already turning away. Mom, Tommy tugged at her sleeve. Can we go up to the treehouse just for a little while? Isabella looked between her son's pleading face and Mark's turned back, the weight of multiple worlds crushing down on her shoulders. Not right now. Sweetheart, I need to make some calls. As she led her children back to their house, Mark stood in his driveway watching the neighborhood wake up to their new reality. Mrs. Henderson waved sadly from her porch. Mr. Patterson stood at his mailbox, shaking his head at a reporter trying to ask him questions. The morning sun caught the treehouse windows, making them gleam like tears. Mark remembered Isabella's words from what felt like a lifetime ago. Sometimes the most valuable things are the ones that carry a history. Now he wondered if some histories were too heavy to bear, if some foundations, no matter how carefully laid, could crack under the weight of too many secrets. The next morning, Mark found a broken window in the treehouse. A rock lay among the shattered glass, wrapped in a paper bearing a single word, fake. The sight of it, jagged edges catching the morning light, splinters of safety glass scattered. Across Sarah's reading nook made something snap inside him. He was gathering the broken pieces when he heard Isabella's sharp intake of breath behind him. I'll pay for it, she said automatically, reaching for her phone. Like you pay for everything? Mark's voice was cold. Is that your solution to every problem? Just throw money at it until it goes away? Isabella's hand dropped. In the harsh morning light, she looked exhausted. Her designer outfit wrinkled from another sleepless night. What would you have me do, Mark? This is my fault, all of it. You're right, he agreed and watched her flinch. But not for the reasons you think. The money, the lies, that's not what matters. It's the trust. Those kids trusted us to build something real. Everything I did was to protect them. Was it? Mark stood, glass crunching under his work boots. Or were you protecting yourself? Before she could answer, Sarah's voice drifted, up from below. Mom, there's a man from the TV station. He says he wants to do a special about our family. Isabella's professional mask slipped into place so quickly it was almost painful to watch. I'll handle it. Like you handled Janet, Mark asked quietly. She turned back, eyes flashing. You have no idea what it's like to have your private life turned into public entertainment, to have something precious twisted into a spectacle. He gestured at the broken window. Actually, I think I'm getting a pretty good idea. That's not fair. Fair? Mark laughed, but there was no humor in it. Fair would have been telling me the truth from the beginning. Fair would have been letting me choose whether to involve myself and this community in your complicated life. I never meant to care, he finished, to let the kids get attached, to build something that actually mattered. Isabella stepped forward, reaching for his arm. Mark, please, but he moved away toward the ladder. You should go handle your press problem. That's what CEOs do, right? Manage the narrative. Don't do this, her voice cracked. Don't make me choose. You already did, he said quietly. The moment you decided we were all just props in your perfect, simple life story. He climbed down, leaving her alone in the broken treehouse. Below, he could hear Tommy trying to explain to the reporter about his superhero figures special. Ours, Sarah's quiet voice telling her brother to come inside. The sound of glass being swept up made him look back. Through the undamaged windows, he could see Isabella kneeling in her expensive suit, carefully gathering the broken pieces. Something about the image, her determination to fix this one small thing when her whole carefully constructed world was shattering, made his chest ache. Mr. Patterson appeared at his fence. Saw what happened to the window, he said gruffly. Got some spare glass in my garage, the right size too. Not sure it matters anymore, Mark replied. The old man snorted. Maybe not, but that treehouse isn't just about them anymore, is it? It's about all of us. Mark looked around the neighborhood, at Mrs. Henderson peeking worriedly from behind her curtains, at the Rodriguez twins drawing keep out signs in bright colors, at all the small ways this community had woven itself into the Montgomery family's story. Above them, Isabella descended the ladder, her suit dusty, her hands clutching a paper bag full of broken glass. Their eyes met briefly before she turned away, shoulders straight, heading to face the waiting reporter. The treehouse cast its shadow across both their yards, a silent reminder of everything they'd built and everything they stood to lose. Mark thought of his father's words about foundations and storms, about building things to last. Sometimes he realized the things that break us are also the things that show us what we're made of. Mark found Sarah's project journal on his workbench the next morning. A note in Isabella's elegant handwriting was attached. She wants you to have this. Real stories matter. He almost set it aside without opening it, but something in the worn corners and dog-eared pages called to him. Inside, beyond the photographs that had been stolen and splashed across the media, he found Sarah's careful documentation of their journey. Her sketches captured moments the cameras had missed. Tommy falling asleep against a stack of lumber, Mark teaching them about different wood grains, Isabella's rare, genuine smiles when she thought no one was watching. Day 12, Sarah had written. Mr. Mark showed me how to use Grandpa's spirit level today. He says a true foundation needs to be level in all directions, just like a true heart needs to be balanced. I think he was talking about more than just the treehouse. A knock interrupted his reading. Isabella stood in his workshop doorway, but not the Isabella he'd come to know, or thought he had. Gone were both the careful suburban mom disguise and the polished CEO armor. She wore old jeans and a faded MIT sweatshirt, her hair pulled back simply. Janet confessed, she said without preamble. She's been working with my ex-husband's company. They're trying to force a hostile takeover. The simple mum story was supposed to make me look unstable, unfit to lead. Mark set the journal down. Why are you telling me this? Because you deserve the truth, all of it. She stepped into the workshop, running her hand along a piece of salvaged wood. When I was 19, I built my first computer in a garage, not much bigger than this. Everything I had went into that machine. People said I was crazy to compete with the big tech companies, but I believed in building something real. She picked up a worn chisel, studying its well-used edge. Success changed things. Suddenly, every decision was scrutinized, every relationship questioned. When my marriage fell apart, it made international news. The children needed something real, Mark finished quietly. Yes, Isabella set the chisel down carefully. This neighborhood, this life, it started as a hiding place. But then you started building that treehouse, and I watched my children come alive again. I watched this community embrace them without wanting anything in return. I watched you teach them about creating something with their own hands, about the value of imperfect things. Her voice caught. I forgot what that felt like. To build something just for the joy of it. To be valued for something other than my stock price. Outside, they could hear Tommy's voice drifting from the treehouse, where he was apparently giving his superhero figure a serious lecture about responsibility. Sarah's quieter tones joined in, defending whatever imaginary transgression was under discussion. I've been calling it Protocol Genesis, Isabella continued. A complete restructuring of Montgomery Digital, moving our headquarters here to this community, building a tech education center for local schools, using our resources to preserve places like this, where children can grow up understanding the value of both innovation and tradition. Mark picked up Sarah's journal again, thumbing through the pages. And what do you want from me? Nothing, she said simply. You've already given us more than I could ever repay. She gestured to her casual clothes, wanted you to finally meet the real me. the one who still believes in building things from scratch. The one who remembers what it's like to create something with her own hands and be proud of every imperfect detail. From above came the sound of breaking glass, but this time followed by children's laughter. They rushed to the treehouse to find Sarah and Tommy carefully picking up the pieces of a jar they'd dropped, giggling at their clumsiness. "Sorry," Sarah called down. "We were trying to make a special shelf for Mum's memory jar, like the one in her old workshop photos." Isabella's breath caught. "You remember those?" "Course we do," Tommy said matter-of-factly. "That's when you used to build stuff with us, before everything got so big." Mark watched something shift in Isabella's expression, a weight lifting, a decision cementing. She turned to him with eyes that held both hope and uncertainty. "I don't want to fix this with money or lawyers," she said softly. "I want to fix it the way you taught us. One piece at a time with honest work and real care. If you'll help us try." Above them, the children had already started planning their special shelf, their chatter flowing naturally between Isabella's old workshop stories and Mark's building techniques. The broken glass between them caught the morning light, transforming sharp edges into something almost beautiful. The new blueprint spread across Mark's workbench was unlike anything they'd originally planned. Isabella's engineering expertise merged seamlessly with his craftsmanship, creating something that honored both their worlds. Solar-powered reading. Lights nestled in handcrafted wooden sconces. A rain collection system fed a small rooftop garden. Traditional joinery techniques supported modern technological additions. "The kids want to call it Genesis," Isabella said, pointing to a particularly clever integration of old and new. "They said it's like the treehouse is growing up with us." Mark nodded, appreciating how the design preserved every meaningful element they'd built together while embracing new possibilities. "Your tech education center plans influenced this, didn't they?" "Sarah's idea, actually. She wants to teach other kids how to build things." Isabella smiled, the genuine one that reached her eyes. "Apparently she's learned from a pretty good instructor." They'd fallen into a comfortable rhythm over the past week. Isabella worked remotely now, conducting billion-dollar negotiations from a corner of the treehouse while the children did their homework. Mark found himself fascinated by her technical knowledge, the way she could calculate load distributions in her head or sketch circuit diagrams between conference calls. "You really did build your first computer in a garage," he remarked one afternoon, watching her repair Tommy's tablet with practiced ease. "Named her Genesis," she admitted. "She was ugly as sin, but perfectly functional. Kind of like that first support beam you let Tommy help with." "Hey, that beam has character!" Their laughter drew Mrs. Henderson from her yard. She'd appointed herself unofficial project photographer, documenting the treehouse's evolution for historical purposes. "You two sound better," she observed, snapping a picture of their shared workspace, "though I did enjoy all the dramatic pining." "We weren't pining," they protested simultaneously, then caught each other's eyes and laughed again. The community had rallied around the project's renewal. Mr. Patterson spent hours teaching the children about traditional woodworking, while Isabella explained basic coding concepts. The Rodriguez twins' father, an electrician, helped design the solar power system. Even the local media had shifted their narrative, celebrating the blend of innovation and community values. One evening, as they worked late installing the new window seat, Tommy asked the question they'd all been avoiding. "Are we really staying forever?" Mark paused in his work, watching Isabella carefully. She set down her tablet and gathered both children close. "What would you think about that?" she asked. "About making this our real home, not just a hiding place." Sarah looked between her mother and Mark. "But what about your company? Dad said you could never leave Silicon Valley." "Sometimes," Isabella said, choosing her words carefully, "we hold on to things because we're afraid of what might happen if we let go. I thought I needed to hide who I was to give you a normal life. But maybe what we needed was to find a place where we could all be ourselves." Even the robot queen parts, Tommy asked seriously. Especially those parts, superhero. She ruffled his hair. As long as we're being honest about them. Mark watched the family moment, feeling both part of it and separate from it. Isabella must have sensed his withdrawal because she reached out, catching his hand. "You know," she said, "every good project needs a master builder, and every tech company could use someone who knows the value of building things by hand," Mark added, squeezing her fingers. The sun was setting, casting long shadows through the treehouse windows. They'd installed the new glass that afternoon, stronger than before, but with a special coating that turned the light into rainbow patterns across the wooden floor. "Look," Sarah pointed to where the colors fell. "It's like the old and new parts are dancing together." Mark thought about his father's lessons on foundations and trust, about Isabella's journey from garage inventor to tech titan, and back to something real. He thought about two children who taught them all about seeing magic in imperfect things. "Well," he said, pulling out his father's old notebook and opening it to a fresh page, "what should we build next?" Tommy's eyes lit up. "A rocket ship, a laboratory," Sarah countered. "How about," Isabella suggested, her hand still in Mark's, "we start with dinner? I seem to remember something about a mean spaghetti recipe." As they climbed down together, the treehouse stood silhouetted against the evening sky, not just a hideaway anymore, but a bridge between worlds, a testament to the strength of things built with love and honesty and the courage to begin again. The morning of the treehouse's completion dawned bright and cool. Mark stood at his workbench, applying the final coat of varnish to a hand-carved sign. The wood grain caught the light, highlighting the carefully burned letters. Genesis, where? Old dreams meet new beginnings. That's beautiful. Isabella's voice came from behind him. She'd taken to wearing what she called her hybrid wardrobe. Designer jeans paired with work boots, silk blouses protected by well-worn workshop aprons. The children will love it. Speaking of the children, Mark glanced at his watch. "Aren't they usually here by now?" Isabella's eyes twinkled. "They're working on a surprise. Apparently we're not the only ones with secrets." The past week had been a flurry of activity. The tech integration had gone smoothly, solar panels nestled discreetly among the branches, powering the reading lights and the small charging station for tablets and laptops. But it was the handcrafted elements that truly made the space special. Every board told a story now. The children had helped sand and finish each piece, learning about different wood types and grain patterns. The community had contributed their own touches. Mrs. Henderson's hand-sewn cushions for the window seat, Mr. Patterson's intricately carved door hinges, the Rodriguez twins' colourful mosaic that caught the morning sun. "Mom, Mr. Mark!" Sarah's voice carried across the yard. "Close your eyes! No peeking!" They obliged, listening to the sound of excited footsteps and poorly suppressed giggles. Tommy's voice whispered loudly, "Is the paint dry? We don't want them to get sticky." "Okay," Sarah announced formally. "You can look now." They opened their eyes to find the children holding a large wooden plaque, clearly made from scraps from the project. Painted in careful letters was a message, "Built by 4. Hearts and many hands." "See," Tommy pointed proudly, "I did the hearts." And Sarah wrote the words, and Mrs. Henderson helped us with the painting, and Mr. Patterson showed us how to sand it smooth. And look, Sarah turned the plaque over. The back was covered in signatures. Every neighbor who had contributed to the project had signed their name and added a small message. Isabella traced the signatures with gentle fingers. "This is perfect," she said softly. "Absolutely perfect." They spent the morning adding the final touches, hanging the signs, adjusting the solar lights, arranging the books in the reading nook. Mark watched as Isabella helped Tommy set up his superhero headquarters in one corner, complete with a small desk where he could draw his adventure stories. Sarah had already filled her section with notebooks and pencils, ready to document new projects. "I'm going to design things like you and Mom," she announced. "Things that help people and look beautiful too." Around midday, delicious smells began wafting from the direction of Mrs. Henderson's house. The whole neighborhood was preparing for tomorrow's official Treehouse warming celebration. Even Mr. Patterson had been spotted carrying his famous secret recipe, potato salad, into his kitchen. "Hard to believe it's really finished," Mark said, standing back to admire their work. The treehouse seemed to glow in the afternoon light, a perfect blend of craftsmanship and innovation. "Is anything ever really finished?" Isabella asked, adjusting a solar panel slightly. "I think the best projects just keep evolving." She had a point. Already there were talks of expanding the tech education program, of using the treehouse as a model for similar community projects. Isabella's company was developing a line of sustainable building materials, inspired by their work here. "The best innovations come from understanding what people really need," she'd explained during one of their planning sessions. "Not just what makes money." As the sun began to set, they gathered for one final inspection. Tommy insisted on giving a grand tour, pointing out every feature with infectious enthusiasm. "And this is where Mum does her robot queen stuff, except now she does it here with us, instead of in a big fancy office. And here's where Mr. Mark taught us about wood grains," Sarah added, running her hand along a particularly beautiful piece of oak. "He says every piece of wood has a story, just like people do." Isabella slipped her hand into Mark's as they watched the children explore their completed sanctuary. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for helping us write a new story." Above them, the first stars were appearing in the deepening blue sky. The solar lights clicked on automatically, casting a warm glow through the windows. Through one of them, they could see Mrs. Henderson arranging flowers in anticipation of tomorrow's celebration. The treehouse stood strong and sure in the gathering. Dusk, its unique blend of old and new, a testament to the power of building bridges between worlds. Tomorrow, it would be filled with community and celebration. But for now, in this quiet moment, it was simply home. The morning of the celebration arrived with a gentle breeze that carried the scent of Mrs. Henderson's famous apple pies across the neighborhood. Multicolored streamers, handmade by the Rodriguez twins, danced between the trees. The entire street had been transformed into a festival ground, with tables of home-cooked dishes stretching from one end to the other. Mark stood at his workbench, polishing a small brass key he'd crafted the night before. It wasn't necessary. The treehouse had no locks, but some moments called for symbolic gestures. He'd carved the handle into the shape of an oak leaf, incorporating a tiny microchip Isabella had given him into the design. "Old and new," he murmured, holding it up to the light. "Just like us," Isabella said, appearing beside him. She wore a simple summer dress, but her feet were clad in the work boots she'd grown to love. The children are practically vibrating with excitement. Tommy's changed his superhero costume 3 times. The sound of cars parking and cheerful greetings filled the air as neighbors began to arrive. Not just their immediate community, but people from all over town who had heard about the project. Local craftsmen who had donated materials, tech enthusiasts intrigued by the innovative elements, families drawn by the story of a community coming together. Sarah and Tommy appointed themselves official greeters, proudly wearing badges they'd designed themselves. Genesis Project team member. They led groups of visitors through the garden, where Isabella had set up displays explaining the sustainable features they'd incorporated. "See these solar panels," Sarah explained to a group of wide-eyed children. "They're special prototypes from Mum's company, and Mr. Mark figured out how to make them look like they're part of the tree." Tommy, not to be outdone, was demonstrating the rain collection system. "It's like the tree is drinking, and then it shares its drink with the plants. And look," he pressed a hidden panel, revealing one of his beloved secret compartments. "There's more surprises than in any superhero." "Hide out!" Mr. Patterson had gathered a group of retired craftsmen beneath the oak, all of them nodding appreciatively at the traditional joinery techniques. Meanwhile, Isabella was surrounded by young tech entrepreneurs, explaining how the project had inspired a new direction for her company. Innovation isn't just about the newest thing, she was saying. It's about finding better ways to support what humans have always needed: community, creativity, connection. Mark felt a tug at his sleeve. Mrs. Henderson stood there, dabbing at her eyes with a handkerchief. "Harold would have loved this," she said softly. "He always said that neighborhood was just another word for family." The moment arrived for the official ribbon cutting. Mark and Isabella stood on either side of the handmade wooden arch that marked the treehouse entrance, the children between them. The brass key gleamed in Mark's hand. "Before we open the doors," Isabella addressed the gathered crowd, "I want to share something. When we came to this neighborhood, we were hiding. I thought I was giving my children a simpler life, but what you all gave us was something far more valuable, a real life, built on genuine connections and shared purpose." She glanced at Mark, who continued, "My father used to say that the strongest things we build are the things we build together. This treehouse isn't just a structure, it's proof that when we combine the wisdom of the past with dreams for the future, something magical happens." Sarah stepped forward with their plaque, "Built by 4 hearts and many hands, and many more to come," Tommy added, grinning at the other children who had gathered close. Mark handed the key to the children. Together, they fitted it into the ceremonial lock, and the doors swung open to reveal their creation in all its glory. Sunlight streamed through the stained glass windows, casting rainbow patterns across the handcrafted floors. Solar-powered lights twinkled like stars among the branches. Every corner held a perfect blend of artistry and innovation. A collective gasp of wonder rose from the crowd, followed by spontaneous applause. As people began to explore the space, Mark felt Isabella's hand slip into his. "You know," she said quietly, "some people might say a tech CEO and a carpenter are an unlikely pair." Mark watched as Sarah showed her school friends the reading nook, while Tommy regaled his audience with tales of construction adventures. "I'd say we built something pretty wonderful together." The treehouse seemed to glow with its own inner light, a beacon of possibility rising above the ordinary world. In its branches, the past and future had found common ground, and 4 hearts had found their way home. 1 month after the grand opening, the treehouse had become more than just a neighborhood landmark. On any given afternoon, you might find Sarah teaching a group of young girls the basics of structural engineering, or Tommy leading imagination workshops for fellow aspiring storytellers. The space hummed with the energy of possibility. Isabella had kept her word about Protocol Genesis. Montgomery Digital's new headquarters was under construction on the outskirts of town. Its design incorporating the same principles of blending traditional craftsmanship with cutting-edge technology. Mark had been surprised to find himself consulting on the project, his practical knowledge of materials and techniques proving invaluable. "The board thinks I've lost my mind," Isabella admitted one evening as they reviewed plans in the treehouse. "A tech company prioritizing handcrafted elements? But our sustainability metrics are through the roof, and employee satisfaction surveys—" She smiled, gesturing to the space around them. "Turns out people crave authenticity, even in the digital age." The Tech Education Center had started small, just a few workshops in the treehouse, but word spread quickly. Soon they had waiting lists for both traditional crafting classes and coding sessions, the sight of children learning to use. Both hand tools and tablets had become commonplace. "Watch this, Mr. Mark," Tommy called from his corner. He'd programmed a small robot to deliver tools to different workstations, proudly showing off the coding skills he'd learned from his mother, while using the woodworking techniques Mark had taught him. Sarah had developed her own project management system, combining her mother's tech expertise with Mark's methodical approach to craftsmanship. "It's for helping other kids build their dreams," she explained, showing off the app she was developing, "because everyone needs a Genesis story." The community had flourished around the project. Mrs. Henderson's garden now supplied fresh vegetables to a weekly neighborhood dinner held in the Treehouse. Mr. Patterson had started a mentorship program, pairing retired craftsmen with young tech enthusiasts to create innovative solutions to local challenges. One afternoon, as Mark was helping the Rodriguez twins set up a new solar panel array, he noticed Isabella standing at the window of her home office. She was on a video call with investors, but instead of her usual corporate backdrop, she let them see the treehouse and the busy community around it. Her presentation materials included photos of children learning, seniors teaching, and families coming together. "This is the future of innovation," he heard her say. "Not just disruption for its own sake, but technology that enhances human connection and creativity." Later that evening, as they sat in the reading nook, going over plans for the next phase of the Tech Education Center, Isabella showed him something she'd been keeping secret. It was a grant proposal, but unlike anything he'd expected. "The Genesis Foundation," she explained, her eyes bright with purpose. "Funding for communities to create their own spaces where tradition and innovation can coexist. Each project will be unique to its community's needs, but all of them built on the same principle, that the strongest foundations are the ones that honor both where we've come from and where we're going." Mark thought about his father's old toolbox, now sitting proudly alongside cutting-edge technology in the Treehouse's main workspace. "A legacy of possibility," he mused. "Speaking of legacy," Isabella smiled, "Sarah asked me something interesting today. She wanted to know if you would walk her down the aisle at her wedding someday, together with me." Mark's heart caught. Outside, they could hear Tommy narrating another superhero adventure to his friends, the story somehow incorporating both ancient wisdom and futuristic technology. The sun was setting, turning the treehouse windows into stained glass jewels. "I think," he said carefully, "that families are like the best buildings. They grow stronger when they add new foundations to the old ones." Isabella's hand found his, their fingers intertwining naturally. "Is that a yes?" "That's a we're building something amazing here," he replied, squeezing her hand. Below them, the sound of children laughing mingled with the hum of computers and the rasp of sandpaper on wood. The treehouse had become a living symbol of their journey. Not just four hearts finding their way home, but an entire community discovering that the future didn't have to mean leaving the past behind. As darkness fell, the solar lights came, on automatically, their warm glow mixing with the traditional lanterns they'd hung among the branches. In their light, you couldn't tell where the old elements ended and the new ones began. It was all simply home now, built by many hands and made stronger by every heart that found shelter in its branches. 1 year later, Mark awoke before dawn to find a familiar sight. 2 children tiptoeing across his yard toward the treehouse, flashlights bobbing in the pre-morning darkness. He smiled, pulling on his work boots. Some traditions hadn't changed. The anniversary celebration was set for later that day, but these early morning moments had become sacred, just the 4 of them, watching the sun rise from their shared sanctuary. He found Isabella already in the treehouse, wearing one of his old work shirts over her silk pajamas, hair caught up in a casual knot. "The kids couldn't sleep," she explained, though they all knew this dawn gathering had been planned. "They wanted to add something to the memory wall before everyone arrives." The memory wall had been Sarah's idea, a space where they collected photographs, artifacts, and mementos from the past year. There was the brass key from the opening ceremony, now tarnished to a gentle patina. Tommy's first robot design hung beside Sarah's original treehouse sketches. A photo of Mark teaching Isabella to use his father's handplane sat next to one of hers, showing him how to code a simple automation program. "Look what we found." Tommy held up a crumpled magazine article, the one that had exposed their story a year ago. "Can we add it? Mrs. Henderson says every good story needs its dramatic moments." Mark and Isabella exchanged glances, remembering the pain and fear of those days. But Sarah was already carefully mounting the article, adding her own caption beneath it, "When our hiding place became our home." The sun began to peek through the eastern windows, catching the crystal wind chimes Mr. Patterson had crafted for their half-year celebration. The sound mixed with the gentle hum of the solar tracking system Isabella had designed, a perfect harmony of old and new. "Genesis 2 breaks ground next week," Isabella mentioned, accepting a cup of coffee from Mark, still her special Costa Rican blend, but now served in handmade ceramic mugs from his new pottery hobby. "The community in Portland is so excited. Their design incorporates elements from their maritime history. The Genesis Foundation had exceeded everyone's expectations. Communities across the country had applied for grants, each proposing their own unique blend of tradition and innovation. The Treehouse had become a blueprint, not just for buildings, but for bringing people together. "Dad called yesterday," Sarah said quietly, arranging her latest engineering sketches on her desk. "He wanted to know if he could come see the treehouse." Isabella stilled, but Mark's steady presence beside her helped maintain her calm. "What did you tell him?" "I said he could," Tommy piped up, "but I told him he has to follow the rules. No suits allowed. And he has to take Mr. Mark's workshop safety course first." They all laughed at that, the tension breaking. The past year had taught them that strong foundations could weather any storm, and real family bonds weren't threatened by new additions. Through the windows, they could see the neighborhood coming to life. Mrs. Henderson was already in her garden, gathering flowers for the celebration. The Rodriguez twins were setting up their latest solar art installation, crystal panels that created dancing light patterns across the treehouse walls. "Mum," Sarah said suddenly, "remember when you used to say that success meant having the biggest office in the tallest building?" Isabella looked around their sanctuary, at the children's projects scattered across handcrafted tables, at the mix of high-tech tools and traditional implements, at Mark's quiet smile as he sanded a new shelf edge. "I think," she replied, "I needed to redefine success." The morning light filled the space completely now, bringing out the rich tones of the wood and making the solar panels gleam. Below, they could hear the first celebration guests arriving, other communities coming to learn from their experience, children eager to join the workshops, families looking to build their own Genesis stories. Mark wrapped an arm around Isabella as Tommy began his now famous tour guide routine, complete with theatrical sound effects for the secret compartments. Sarah followed behind, adding technical specifications and historical context with scholarly precision. "Pretty amazing what a simple treehouse can lead to," Mark mused. Isabella leaned into him, watching their children share their passion with the newcomers. "I don't think anything about this treehouse was ever simple, just like nothing about this family was ever ordinary." The morning breeze carried the sound of laughter and conversation up through the branches of their faithful oak tree. In its embrace, two worlds had become one. 4 hearts had become a family, and a hiding place had become a beacon of possibility. Some said it was just a treehouse, but those who knew better understood. It was a Genesis story, written in wood and wire, in laughter and tears, in the perfect blend of what was and what could be. And like all the best stories, it was really just the beginning.